California is the wealthiest state in the richest country on earth, and on any given night, it has more people sleeping outside than anywhere else in America. On a single night in January 2024, the federal housing government counted more than 771,000 homeless people nationwide, the highest on record. More than 187,000 of them were in California, about a quarter of the entire country, and by far the most of any state. California also has the nation's highest rate of unsheltered homelessness. Roughly two-thirds of homeless residents sleep outside, in vehicles, or in places never meant for people to live. Nowhere is it more concentrated than Los Angeles County, where the annual count is the largest of its kind in the United States. After peaking above 75,000 people in 2023, the count has now fallen 2 years in a row to about 72,000 countywide in 2025, with street homelessness down around 10%. And yet, with an estimated 7 people dying on the county's streets every single day, one county supervisor noted that the current pace, it would take roughly 3 centuries to end homelessness in Los Angeles. Here, in the 50 blocks of Skid Row downtown, somewhere between 8 and 12,000 people live in just a few square blocks. So what's driving this? Researchers have studied it for decades, and much of the recent work points to one answer above all: the cost of housing. Economists at Stanford, the University of California, and the Public Policy Institute of California have found that places with the worst homelessness aren't the ones with the most addiction or mental illness. Those exist everywhere. They're the places where housing is most expensive. The largest representative study of homelessness Californians in 30 years, led by UC San Francisco, found that participants had a median income of about $960 a month before they lost their housing. And most said a modest rental subsidy or even one-time help would have kept them off the street. That doesn't make the rest a myth. Severe mental illness and addiction run through the chronically homeless population, a legacy of emptying California's psychiatric hospitals decades ago without funding the community care meant to replace them. On Skid Row, the fentanyl crisis has made the streets deadlier than ever. But causation runs both ways. People fall into homelessness for many reasons, and living on the street makes mental illness and addiction far worse. Which causes a leader chooses to emphasize tends to predict the solution they reach. Which brings us to the money and what it bought. Over 5 years, from 2018 to 2023, California spent roughly $24 billion on more than 30 homelessness programs. Then, in 2024, the state's own auditor delivered a damning verdict. The state had largely stopped tracking whether any of it worked. The agency in charge of coordinating the response had quietly stopped tracking spending and outcomes back in 2021, even as billions kept flowing. The local story rhymes. In 2016, Los Angeles voters approved a $1.2 billion bond to build supportive housing. The original estimate was about $350,000 per apartment. By the time the city controller audited it, costs had climbed past $500,000 a unit. One project reached $837,000, and the buildings rose far too slowly to keep up. Audits of the county's main homelessness agency later found nearly zero financial oversight, and in 2025, the county pulled hundreds of millions of dollars from it and built a new department from scratch. But some things have clearly worked. California's Home Key program, which converts old motels into housing, did it for a fraction of new construction cost. The one effort the state auditor actually called cost-effective. And the most cited success is Houston, Texas, which has cut homelessness by roughly 63% since 2011 by merging dozens of agencies into one coordinated system, following the data and clearing encampments only after finding housing for the people living in them. The catch: Houston had far cheaper housing to work with, and its progress is fragile as federal money tightens. By contrast, simply clearing the streets has a poor track record. Researchers who studied encampment sweeps in Los Angeles found the visible drop usually lasted only 2 or 3 months before people returned. And in one case, sweeps pushed people out of tents and into sleeping completely in the open. Enforcement moves people. It doesn't house them. Even so, since the 2024 Supreme Court ruling, cities can now ban public camping even when no shelter is available, and dozens across California have done exactly that. The sharpest fight among experts is an approach called housing first, giving people stable housing before requiring sobriety or treatment. Supporters point to strong evidence that it keeps people housed, especially veterans. Critics argue it hasn't been shown to end homelessness community wide or save money at scale, and that severely addicted or mentally ill people need treatment, not just a key. In 2025, the federal government began shifting billions away from the housing first towards treatment first programs, the biggest change in national strategy in years. California, meanwhile, is betting on both, pouring billions into treatment beds while a new court process tries to compel care for severely ill, with mixed early results. The uncomfortable truth is that every solution has a trade off. Building housing addresses the root cause, but it's slow and expensive. Treatment helps the most visibly ill, but reaches few of the people whose real problems simply rent. Sweeps look fast, but fade in months. Prevention is cheapest of all, but you can't photograph the crisis that never happened. Real progress, the success stories suggest, doesn't come from one big fix. It comes from doing the unglamorous things consistently and tracking the money for longer than any single political term. The facts that aren't in dispute are these. California has spent more on the crisis than ever before, and for years couldn't say what the money bought. The places that actually reduce homelessness did it by coordinating, following the data, and committing to housing for the long haul. The strongest driver of the crisis is the cost of the place to live. And even after 2 years of progress, more than 70,000 people in Los Angeles County alone still have nowhere to go. Housing or treatment, compassion or enforcement, money or better spent money is a choice about values as much as evidence. And that choice belongs to the public.